Okay, so we're back to my older setup. I don't know if you prefer these or not, but it's just a bit more comfortable for me to record these kinds of video using my older setup. There are a lot of hate surrounding the KZ brand, and in my opinion the hate is quite a bit well placed while a bit overdone, I guess. Because I am actually one of the people who don't actually really like the company. And because of the reasons that I will tell you in this video. But then again, my integrity as a reviewer, I will say if something is good, I will say that they are good. If something is bad, then I say they are bad. And CCA is basically KZ, right? As you might know, CCA is owned by KZ, so the CCA CST is a part of the KZ company product. So yeah, the CCA CST actually impressed me. So it's a first, really, something that really impressed me. Though they still have they still do that one thing that really irks me about KZ. I guess that's the TLDR, a very vague TLDR idea. That's because I want you to watch the rest of the video. Oh, so yeah. First of all, let's get to the build quality, design, and everything else. It's actually very well designed. I really like they're made of wood. The shape is a bit too bulky in my opinion, but they are supposedly open back. They are made of actually wood. You can actually feel the grain here. So yeah, a very interesting, very creative build that a lot of Chi-Fis need to learn how to do. And yeah, very good build quality. The cable is attached though, so no changing cables, no that, etc. But you can, I think you can mod these into like an MMCX. But the cable here is fine. I guess it's L-shape. It's okay. The mic works fine. The button works fine. So yeah, you get also the tips, which is just standard KZ Starline tips, which is okay. Surprisingly, they're actually an okay ear tips. They are definitely not the worst. Like the TRN ear tips are just horrendous. The QKZ ear tips are just unusable, so the KZ ear tips are actually good in my opinion. The box is very uneventful. It's just like this is just a box for cables, I guess. A very uneventful box. The usual KZ box are a bit more interesting than these, definitely. So these are very cheap. These are about $10 to $10 to $12. Very, very budget IMs. But okay, let's get to the bass first. Okay, the bass. Oh wait, we need to go to the general tonality first. The general tonality is very V-shaped. It's a very particularly tuned V-shape. They don't sound as what KZ usually sound. They're a bit different than the typical KZ sound. You all know the house sound of KZ. You know the high elevation at 2K and the 6 and 8K. Like 268. I think it's like that. The type of elevation, or 248. I forgot. I think it's 248 actually. But you know the usual KZ, ZS10 Pro, ZSN Pro X, the EDX, you know, they all have the same kind of elevation. Though it's a bit more, the elevation in here in the CST is a bit later at about 3K if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, almost 3K, and they don't dip as hard as usually KZs go. So they are very bright sounding, though they don't have the usual extremely sibilant sounding, but it's not as harsh sounding as usually KZs do, but they are very, very elevated at the mid-range. So I don't know how KZ does this, but yeah, they're still very, very elevated, though they are not as, you know, sharp as what you would expect KZ to sound like. So yeah, they're not typically as sharp. That may be because of the less elevation at the 2K region or something else. And they are very, very V-shaped. You would notice the dip there. Though at the same time, I would know why they do this kind of tuning, and what they create is something that is rather interesting that we'll get to there later in the technicality department. So the bass here is quite deep, quite punchy. It's like what you would expect a very elevated bass. It has that mid bass bleed. It does have that. It kind of muddies up the mid range a bit, but not really by much, in my opinion. It's not as bad as something like the Blonde 03s, maybe. It's not as bad as the Blonde 03s, but it's definitely elevated and kind of bleeds to the mid-range. It's well textured. It's okay. It's well textured. But when you go when you listen to a very sub bass focused music, you would notice that the type of bass they have, it's a type of bass that envelops the whole music and actually covers everything up. So they just shit on everything else. So even though they are quite deep and quite punchy and quite well, they're okay textured. I'm saying this considering the price range, of course. They still kills the mid range. Get a picture. The mid-range is quite V-shaped. It's quite recessed in the 1K region, so a lot of the fundamental tones of higher pitched males or female voices tend to get a bit more drawn out. So it's not very forward. You don't have that type of well-bodied female vocal there, or higher registered male vocals. However, deep and gravelly male vocals tend to sound well-bodied here, so it's the usual dipping. The upper mid-range is not as shouty as what I would expect KZs to sound like, so this is actually what I like about this. But what I don't like is the treble region. We'll get to treble region right now. So the treble region is not really elevated at the lower treble region, but it's more of the mid treble region. So the mid treble region here is very, very, very fucking elevated, in my opinion. It's just too much, in my opinion. So when you listen to a lot of music that have vocals in it, you would notice that the harmonics or the S or the T's would actually, not only they sound elevated, but they overpower the actual vocal. Now that's fucking dumb, in my opinion. It's not that sibilant. It's not that sibilant. It's not that like the piercing type of sound, but it's just very... It doesn't sound good. It doesn't sound right. It just ruins the whole vocal. It's not supposed to be there. So the treble region and the bass region just ruins the thing. Okay, so and then now we're going to go to the technicalities. The technicality of this thing is actually okay. It's actually good. That's why That's why I, as a reviewer that focuses a bit more on technicalities over tonality, would say that their technicality is actually pretty impressive, especially at their low price point. And I understand why, especially in the definition department also. And I would understand and their frequency response, which just corresponds to why the definition is so good. If you look at the frequency response graph of IMs like the what do you call it, the Data Dream, you will notice that you have a V-shaped type of frequency graph. While not as V-shaped as these, they are mild. They're V-shaped. They're just V-shaped. But they're not as extremely V-shaped as these. So you'll have a peak around 6 to 10K, and that's what I like to call the definition range. And elevations there would contribute on creating a sense of definition to the music. So these having very elevated 6 to 10K contributes to why these sounds are very well defined. If you look at Critical's graph tool, you'll go and compare the CST and the Data Dream. You'll notice that they have quite a similar elevation at 6 to 10K. Just that the elevation in the CST is significantly more like on steroids. And yeah, that's why I think they have a very solid definition. The resolution is actually pretty okay too. It's very, very, very good for the price. Their stage is also very good for their price, though their separation and imaging it's not that good. I guess it gets clumped up easily. It gets compressed easily in busier tracks. So not all fronts of their technicalities are good. Now I'm going to talk a bit more about KZs after establishing that these are actually quite an okay pick, because I'm going to talk about why I don't really like KZ as a company. Because first of all, KZ don't give a shit. All of KZ's IMs is very treble focused, and KZ caters to more newer or more new audiophiles that just got into the game. And subjecting newer audiophiles to KZs is just like subjecting babies to whiskey. It will ruin them. I myself is an enjoyer of an elevated generally elevated treble IMs or headphones. It shows that a lot of my high-end headphones, such as, it's not actually high-end anymore, the HD800s, the Hi-Fi-Man Arias I have right there, or like a lot of my general just headphones I use are definitely brighter tuned, like the DT880s. I really like those. IMs like the MDIX1000, which is one of my favorite IMs, they have very elevated treble. Though comparing them with the KZs, when I started comparing these with each other, they suck. The treble is just very, very bright. They're fucking bright. They're so fucking bright that my HD800 just sounds dark in comparison. A fucking HD800 sounds fucking dark in comparison. So, and higher frequencies tend to ruin ears frequency adaptability or adaptiveness more than lower frequencies. Especially for younger audiophiles, you'll ruin your ears earlier. You'll lose a lot of frequencies adaptability when you get older. You can only listen to about like 12K, I guess, when you're about 60 or something. And especially for younger audiophiles like me, guess my age below, listening to a lot of KZs. And with my comparison, treble peaks, insane levels of treble peaks are exclusively this region for region's problem instead of these. But I'm going to compare it with these later. So, in my opinion, they would... This is a message to KZ. I mean, I am not an avid hater of their IMs. I think this is pretty solid. But just fucking stop. And back to the review. That's a bit of a rant I got there. Are they better and are they about $100 range good? No. No. People say that's a fucking joke. These are not... I usually don't go through reviews when trying out an IM. But for the CCA CST, I actually listen to the review before I actually want to try one or review one. And one of the reviews, and some of the reviews are just very different from one another. Just some of them just say that, oh, these sound fucking neutral, it doesn't sound V-shape at all. I mean, fuck you. That's not... This is extremely V-shape. And another review would just say, oh, this is the best, like $100. Oh, no, they're not. I'm just gonna give you the hard fucking truth. They're not. They're honestly not. Maybe if you just count the definition, that's it. You'll get, yeah, sub $100 definition. Yeah, you'll get that here. But everything else, the tonal balance, especially if you have just a smidge of priority in tonal balance, these are definitely a piece of garbage. Though for me, as a technical head, these are actually pretty okay. I guess that's it for this individual. Let's compare it with the KZs. The other KZs, all of them have insane treble region, just what I mentioned before. Though with the ZSTX, it's just overall more treble, more pain, less definition, less detail, and just a shittier KZ. And the EDX is a bit more mid-range focus, it's a mid-range, is not as pull-backed as the CCA CST, though it's slightly a bit more sibilant, though the mid-treble range, it's not as elevated as the CCA CST, so you don't have that type of the treble overpowering the mids type of thing like you have in the CCA CST. So yeah, unless you listen to them at lower volumes, I would say that they're okay, I guess, in lower volumes. So that's the, if you have one and anything from this review, listen to KZs at lower volumes, or your ears won't survive as long. Against the MH755, these have better definition and slightly better detail retrieval. However, the MH755 still easily wins in terms of tonal balance, and it has better stage depth. It doesn't sound as munched up into like a bowl of sound, like a whole mess bowl of sound. rubber band ball of sound. It spaced out the instruments a bit better in the MH75. It creates a bit more better space. So yeah, against the VK4 is actually this has crap technicalities. It has absolute garbage technicalities. Though the tonality is crazy good. I mean, like legit crazy good. And they're actually one thing that I about them that I would not recommend, which is they have abhorrent, terrible, crap, eat my ass, shitty quality control, which is, I don't know. I mean, they sell a lot of these. They sell a lot of VK4. It gets hyped, quite hyped. Though the quality control is just still fucking hot garbage, even compared to anything else this cheap. Like the KZ's I've never had an absolutely abhorrent quality control KZ experience. Maybe it's just me, but I've never had that. But for QKZ, oh my god. Against the MT1 now, this is a very interesting comparison because the MT1, in my opinion, is quite good. I would much prefer the MT1 over the CST. It doesn't really have the CST's definition, but it's definitely better tuned. It has better bass control. The bass, while it's not as elevated nor as punchy, it has better bass control. It's just an overall better IM. It's more neutrally tuned if you prefer that. It's just as detailed, I guess. It has more correct tonal balance. It does have a bit of shoutiness. While the CCA CST kinda reminds me of a much terribly tuned Dita the Dream. The TRM MT1 reminds me of a slightly, not as slightly, but quite a noticeable step down in tuning for the Dunu Lunas. So both the Dunu Lunas and the Dream sound tuning and tonality just is not of their price. It's they're crap for their price. But for this price, though, in my opinion, the MT1 is actually considerably better tuned while retaining as good as technicalities as the CCA CST, with arguably better stage depth and layering. So yeah, I would still prefer the MT1. It's not still, actually. I just recently got this unit too. I would recommend the MT1 over the CST. So yeah, I guess that's it for my review and a bit of rant. See you next time. Godspeed.